Hello, I'm Paulette Freeman with the Bridge Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center, and I'm the Executive Director. And if you haven't heard about the Bridge Alzheimer's Dementia Resource Center, let me tell you a little bit about it. We are a nonprofit organization to help you navigate through the Alzheimer's and dementia diseases. And we do that by providing resources, education, and support services. An interesting fact about the Bridge is that we collaborate with the Center for Brain Health at LSU Health Shreveport. They're actually in the same building we are. We like to call it a wraparound service where we provide the social services part and the support services, and they provide the clinical trials portion of this. So we're here to help you navigate your way. We're located at 851 Olive Street. If you'd like to come by and visit us, we invite you to do so. We're honored to be here today with Dr. Dedrick Jordan with LSU Health Shreveport. And we're here also because we have some questions about the new drug that FDA has approved for us, Leqembi. And we wanted to inform the community more about it and talk about it and discuss it and just become more aware of it and what we can look for in the future. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you very much. So my name is Dedrick Jordan, and I'm the chair of the Department of Neurology at LSU Health Shreveport. And we're excited to have this opportunity to talk with you today about this new drug that just got FDA approved that's on the market now for Alzheimer's disease.
Great, thank you. So just to get started, can you provide us with a brief overall description of Alzheimer's and the disease?
Yes. So Alzheimer's disease is a progressive neurological disorder, and it mainly affects patients' cognition, so memory, their reasoning and thinking, as well as behavioral issues. And it impairs patients or people's ability to really carry out their normal activities. So it impairs them in some way. Now, it is the most common cause of dementia by far. More than 2/3 of cases of dementia are due to Alzheimer's disease. I mean, it is a progressive disorder, like I mentioned. About 6 million people, approximately, in the U.S. are affected by Alzheimer's disease. And that's for those that are over 65 years old. Probably another few million younger than 65. Just because it is less commonly recognized in younger adults. And it is a progressive disorder. It ranges from about 4 to 10 years after diagnosis of the disease course. And it does lead to death, early death.
It's sad. It's really sad. So a lot of times when patients are diagnosed, they come to us and they ask, they talk about the different stages. Can you talk about the different stages of Alzheimer's?
Sure. Well, I think one important thing is that there's also a disorder we call mild cognitive impairment, which I'll talk about first, and that can be a precursor to Alzheimer's disease. And it's unclear exactly what percent, but a large fraction of patients with mild cognitive impairment may go on to develop Alzheimer's. And really the distinguishing factor between Alzheimer's and mild cognitive impairment is that with MCI, patients have issues with their memory. They become more forgetful than expected. They may miss meetings that are really important or have trouble with coming up with their words. But it doesn't really impair or impact their normal activities. Whereas with dementia, that's where it progresses to the point where it actually impairs their ability to carry out their normal activities. So when we think about Alzheimer's, it's typically broken down into mild, moderate, and severe forms.
Mild, moderate, and severe forms. Okay.
And the mild form mainly is going to be patients that have, again, issues with memory. They may have symptoms such as getting lost, forgetting things, as well as trouble with maybe their finances, managing their checkbook. And often this is when Alzheimer's is diagnosed, during the mild form. And then moderate, patients are having progressive symptoms. So now they're having issues where maybe they have trouble getting dressed themselves, carrying out more activities such as that. And they may also begin to have some behavioral problems, things like delusions, paranoia, agitation. And then the more severe form, the severe form of Alzheimer's disease, patients at that point become really unable to communicate, care for themselves. They require 24-hour care, and towards the end will become bedridden.
Thank you for clearing that up. So let's talk about the drug Leqembi. What is Leqembi?
So Leqembi is a medication that was developed over the last 10 years. And it's an infusion drug. It's given by IV.
Okay.
And really it targets the amyloid that builds up in the brain for patients with Alzheimer's disease. And we know at least partly that this amyloid buildup is partly responsible for Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, time out just a second. Let's talk about amyloids.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what that is?
Yep. So with Alzheimer's disease, there's really a buildup of two things in the brain. One is amyloid, and that occurs really in between the cells, and it interferes with the cells in your brain to be able to communicate and connect properly, and that causes the symptoms. And there's also what we call tangles. These are buildups that occur inside the cells in the brain. Now, this medication targets the amyloid, and it helps clear it out from the brain.
Thank you, Dr. Jordan, for joining us today to talk about Leqembi and Alzheimer's disease. I appreciate it. With us today also, we're honored to have him, actually, Dr. Roger Kelly, well-known, respected neurologist at LSU Health Shreveport. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, for being here with us and answering some more questions for us. So, Dr. Jordan talked about what Leqembi is, but how does Leqembi help in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease? He talked about attacking the amyloid. Could you go on a little bit more specifics on how that would work?
Well, what we know about Alzheimer's disease, it's progressive, so unfortunately patients get worse over time, and that seems to be the natural history of the disease. So anything you can do to protect against progression is certainly exciting in that regard. So with Leqembi, we know that it will remove the toxic protein called the beta amyloid, and that appears to be its mechanism of how it's working to protect against progression, with a protection rate of about 27% compared to placebo. But it will probably vary among patients. I suspect there's going to be patients that will clearly show a benefit from taking the medicine, and others that might not do as well with that. So it's like a lot of our medicines. You have patients that can do a commercial for the product, and other patients that just don't seem to do as well with it. So we have to, as clinicians, figure out who might be the best candidates and also who might be the worst candidates in terms of side effects. And that's going to be what the obligation of the clinician is going to be now.
So what is the diagnostic criteria, and how will you determine whether or not a patient is a candidate for this drug?
Well, you have to have beta amyloid plaques in the brain in order for the drug to work. So we have to determine or detect whether they have the plaques either by what's called a cerebral PET scan, which is a specialized brain imaging study that's available here just down the road through the Biomedical Research Foundation and through LSU. Also, a cerebrospinal fluid examination can also reliably detect beta amyloid. So those are the two potential studies right now that need to be done in order, one or the other, to determine whether the patient's a candidate for the medication. It looks like there's some blood tests that will be just as accurate in that regard. They're commercially available, but they're not yet approved as a determinant about whether the drug will be approved or not for coverage by Medicare.
You mentioned Medicare and the cost of that. So we don't know if Medicare will pay for it yet, or? Well,
with Medicare, they've agreed through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid to cover the expenses associated with the drug. We're not sure if it's going to be 100% or 80% or whatever. That's still being worked out because the drug involves the cost of the medicine, which has been calculated to be about $26,500 a year, which is not really excessive compared to some of the other biologics that are out there. They have to have at least 3 MRI follow-up brain scans as part of the monitoring process, and they have to have an infusion every 2 weeks. So there are certain expenses related to the care and delivery of the drug, so to speak, but it looks like it's probably manageable. If you can reduce the disability of the disease so that people perhaps can work longer and be more productive, then it will pay for itself in its own way, as well as, just the ethical quality of life that you want to maintain for people so they can still enjoy their family, activities, hobbies, etc., because that's extremely important, is to maintain that as best as possible.
Dr. Jordan, he talked about how Leqembi is administered by infusion, but how often is that done?
It's given every 2 weeks for at least 18 months. The studies lasted about 18 months. If, for example, you're able to remove the plaques completely, let's say by serial imaging or whatever, then the drug has done its course, so to speak. So the study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine led to the approval of the drug was for 18 months, and we're hoping that there'll be patients that will have a very nice response to the medication, perhaps not have to continue it indefinitely. But as of right now, it's going to be every other week for at least 18 months, assuming they tolerate the drug well and they feel that it's making a difference for them.
Okay. And how will you monitor then the patient as you administer the drug?
We will monitor them clinically, obviously, but there are going to be serial magnetic resonance imaging or MRI brain scans to look to make sure that they're not having untoward effects of the drug, specifically brain hemorrhage or swelling, which could potentially be dangerous. So that has to be carefully determined in terms of patient selection to make sure that we're lowering that risk as much as we can.
What other potential side effects could there be? We talked a little bit about the bleeds, the brain bleeds, so that's why you're having to do the scans. Are there any other side effects you have to watch out for?
The main one would be the infusion site reactions.
Okay.
You know, when people get infusions, some of them have allergic reactions or some sort of reaction. So hopefully those will be manageable when they occur, but sometimes people can get more serious infusion reactions, so that will have to be checked for as well.
So when will the drug be available?
Well, we're working toward getting it available within the month or so. We're working with administration in that regard. We have a patient navigator, a physician assistant who's going to help with the logistics of the drug. I'm doing a lumbar puncture actually this afternoon on a patient who's a potential candidate to determine whether she's eligible for the drug. We have had a PET study going on here, so we have a number of patients who have already had positive cerebral PET scans that are eligible for the drug. So we're ready to move forward, hopefully within the next month or so.
That is so exciting. I mean, very exciting. It should be exciting in the world of Alzheimer's research and how it's come about. Even though it's been, 20 years maybe since a new drug has been introduced, and so I know you must be excited about
this.
Right,
I share that excitement. I think what you want is to offer patients when you use the standard drugs that have been available for the past 20 years, and you realize that they're not wonder drugs necessarily, but you have a drug that potentially could significantly protect against progression. It's very exciting to have that potentially available, so I think there's quite a bit of excitement related to that.
It is, it is. So if someone is interested, thinks they want to be a candidate, what can they do? Do they contact your office? Do they contact who at LSU Health Shreveport can they contact? Or they have to go through a doctor?
Right. We ask for referrals so we can get baseline information. If they've already had studies done, we don't want to have to repeat it necessarily with excessive expense. So we ask for some referrals through the primary physicians. We get those all the time. I've got a big, thick stack of referrals, as a matter of fact. So we're seeing quite a flurry of interest in that regard. But we do ask for preliminary information from the primary care so we don't have to repeat studies unnecessarily and make sure that they might be eligible for that. We don't want to give them false belief. If they're not really the right candidate to receive the drug, then we want to be very cautious in that regard, but also very gentle.
Yeah, well, that's very exciting. Very exciting news. And to have you ready with a care navigator here to help with that process, that's going to help quite a bit also. What would you say to the patients or the family members that aren't too sure about it, but would be great candidates for the new drug?
Well, they have to be knowledgeable about it, and they have to be comfortable with it. I think both, that you have to give them the proper knowledge of the potential benefits versus the potential risk and make sure that they're comfortable. I'm not going to twist anybody's arm. The drug has just been released. We'll have a lot better perspective on the response to the drug, how it's used, potential side effects, etc., moving forward within probably the next 6 to 12 months. So there are going to be certain patients that really want to move forward with that. I certainly am seeing a number of them. But if somebody really doesn't feel comfortable with it, they really shouldn't be getting that infusion right now and perhaps just waiting and just, there's some other medications that are being considered now for potential release. So things are moving forward in a positive way, and I think that's the most important message.
So I heard that message. There's some other drugs coming down the pipeline that may have a great impact too on helping with Alzheimer's.
That's what we hope. Correct.
Very good. Have anything else to add about the new drug?
No, I think that we're moving forward in a cautious fashion to make sure that we're careful with patient selection. And like I said, we want knowledgeable patients, knowledgeable family members who are comfortable with the decision-making process.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, for joining us today. We appreciate it and helping introduce the drug and make people more aware and informative and knowledgeable about Leqembi and also Alzheimer's. Thank you.
Very welcome.